Hey listeners, George here. I know I'm a part of the podcast and I'm doing a bumper for the podcast. It's a little weird. Listen, just listen, okay? Greg and I do another podcast called PlayStation Power where we cover PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games. It's not family friendly, but you might like it. Also, if you like me on this podcast, I also do other things. Master System Masterpieces, we cover Master System games, and we even have a podcast, The Box Fort, not family friendly, but my co-host Joe and I sit down, talk about wacky and weird things, uncensored, and sometimes we bring on a guest and it gets really fun. So if you're not easily offended, and you're able to withstand this uncensored content, please take a listen to The Box Fort. You can find them on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or just on my website, which is tehboxfort.com, tehboxfort.com. Thank you, and now the SNES podcast with Greg and George. That's me.
$200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. You're listening to the SNES podcast with your hosts, Soul Blazer and George.
Hello everybody, thank you once again for tuning in to the Super NES podcast. Whether this is your first time or many times with us, we very much appreciate you downloading or listening to this podcast episode. He is George, I'm Greg, and we're here again to hopefully entertain you with another Super NES title coverage.
Hi, I'm George. Was that a good enough intro, Greg?
About par what you do on the podcast, yes.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
So we are looking at this week one of my all-time favorite games. Not so much a favorite on this system for reasons that we'll get into, but at least a game I have a whole bunch of history and nostalgia for. We're looking at the Super NES version of Nobunaga's Ambition, which is a strategy/simulation game developed and published by Koei, released for the system in 1993. And this is George's first time playing the game.
It is.
One of your first times playing Koei strategy series, period, right?
No, I played Dynasty Tactics a little bit.
Kind of, sort of.
That's strategy.
Yeah.
That's because you control the generals and like it's not. I mean it's like you don't have the. I don't think you have the aspect of like controlling a territory and taxes and stuff like that. But it's like a combat strategy, or not combat strategy, but like a turn-based strategy game where you have to make sure your generals are not killed or whatever, but also make sure that you're taking out the enemies. So it's a strategy game. I mean, you're not doing any of the Dynasty Warriors stuff.
Right, yeah. Well,
so.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I just never thought about that because I kind of have more narrow definition. But that's a valid point. It's games like Nobunaga's Ambition and the very popular and still ongoing Romance of the Three Kingdoms series that Koei is probably best known for until recently. Now the best franchise that they have going, one that keep going back to the well, maybe one too many times. the Dynasty Warriors series that George already mentioned. But,
apparently, okay, so I hate to bring it up here, but apparently I saw a new Dynasty Warriors game come out, but it was not a full-fledged game. I forgot what it was called, but it's a PSN game.
Interesting.
We'll talk about this later.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, Nobunaga's ambition is important to me because I can directly say that the game had a direct impact upon my life and upon some of the choices and decisions that helped to shape and influence. Because I already had been interested in things like history and tragedy games and whatnot by the time this game came out in the West. We'll talk about the lineage of the series here in a moment, but the NES version of the game came out in 1989, and I was 13 at the time that I got the game, and I loved it from the start. It was a game I never had seen before, so I was very, very into it for that reason. And it made me want to go to the library and get some books to explain the subject matter better, because of course in these days there was no internet. So just and it really helped to, and this game, along with Civilization, which came out the following year, and some other games like that, really helped to influence me at that impressionable age, and kind of convinced me that history was something I did want to pursue, and I eventually would go on to college to get a degree in it. And at 13, I was old enough to be able to grasp the concepts, an idea of how to play the game. The manual also really helped because Koei knew this kind of game was very unique to Westerners. They included the game. Not only was there a map, but there was also a very thick. I want to say on the order of 80 pages. I didn't look at the scan of this online, but online before I podcast it. But it's a very, very thick manual, which went into huge and loving detail about the history behind the game and how the game played, and comparisons, and there was bios of the major daimyos the time period whatnot, and I always remember that they made the example right in the beginning of the manual. Well, this was two parts of the manual that really stick out for me. One part is in the beginning of the manual. It says to best understand the situation in Japan, just the time period. Think of the American Civil War. The difference being that instead of there only being two countries, the North and the South, Japan was divided up to about 50 countries. Who were
and I don't think they were fighting about slaves either.
No, but
there you go.
And there's another part later on in the manual where they're talking about one of the daimyos, one of the famous ones, because they gave bio coverage to about a dozen or so playable daimyos who were in the game, and so they're talking about one of them, one of the famous ones, and I won't give the names here because but I'm almost quoting directly in the manual. They said the first time that character A met character B in battle, he wet his kimono and ran for his life. and I'm how can you not love a manual that uses language like that?
I don't know. Honestly, I think this game was important to have on the console because you didn't see, and even to this day, you don't see a lot of strategy type of games.
True, yeah.
On consoles, you kind of see a little bit more, but not as much as you do see on computers, especially that era back then.
Well, this game came out first originally on computers, in the West, and then got the console console port later on. But
which is weird to think that this game was on computers, because as a game on the computer, it seems kind of limited compared to what else was out there.
Well, most of Koei's games did come out on the computer, as well as consoles. At least in Japan, not in the West. But yeah. So the Super NES version of the game doesn't have quite as good a manual like the NES version did, but it's still pretty good manual. Sidetrack. Boy, I really hate I mean, I really hate the fact that modern games don't have manuals like anymore. Like, I miss those days.
I mean, there's the internet.
I know, but it's not the same thing as actually like picking up a thick manual and smelling it, and smelling the paper, the paper content and flicking through it, and like having like tons and tons of historical information and background development stuff, whatnot included inside of it, and pictures.
But I mean, they're not gonna do that now because it's cheaper to not do a manual first off, and it also like it's if you think about it, it's actually it's good for the environment because you're not cutting down trees to print out manuals when you can just go read it on something digital.
Yeah.
And save those trees on top of a lot of other things. I mean, manuals, even in digital form, they are very limited, but for the most part, you're gonna be, the demographic you're shooting for is going to be a demographic that doesn't really need a manual because of, well, I mean, on top of having tutorials in games now that beat you over the head.
Right.
Most of the time, people already know how to play games.
Right.
So, it's a different market now, back compared to SNES, Genesis, whatever era. Which is kind of sad because manuals are missing. Okay. Like, even back in, like, what was it, like 2006 or whatever, when, like, Elder Scrolls Oblivion came out, that was a massive manual. And that was like an Xbox 360 game, and that was surprising even for that era. But it's a shame we don't have manuals, but it's kind of a good thing that we don't,
Yeah,
and
I suppose so.
Things change, and sometimes you miss the way that things were, but you just gotta keep that in the back of your mind, but also just catch up with the times, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the manual like this game was definitely.
It was interesting. It really was.
Yeah, it was definitely a very good manual, and like you said, needed for a game like this because because this wasn't the first game in the franchise. We'll talk about the history of the franchise here in a moment, but it was the first one to come out like in the West. Nobunaga's Ambition is a franchise that's still ongoing today. It has obviously been very, very popular in its home country.
I was so tempted at getting the newest one on Steam.
Yeah, I have it on my wish list. So as soon as the price drops to a decent level, I'll snatch up for sure. But
because that looks awesome.
But most of the games the franchise have not come out here in the West. Only like a handful of games have. So if you know anything about Koei, most of their games they've done over the years have been like strategies, have been like strategy simulation historical games, like this games and the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and like some other games. Not all their games have been history based. They do have some other stuff too. Like they have the Aerobiz games on the 16-bit systems, which are really good airplane management games. And there's also the Uncharted Water franchise, which is a combination of action, adventure, RPG, simulation, which are really great games.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I covered the second game, New Horizons, on like a slow episode of the podcast.
Okay.
Last year. It's one of my favorites. Like it's a really, really fun, unique game. So, Koei's also published some other stuff over the years. They also they published a shooter like the N64 they call Winback. I've never heard of that. Yeah, they have branched out. They have branched out like some other areas, and of course, like I said before, the Dynasty Warriors series, like what they're most known for these days.
They're infamous for that.
Yes.
The infamous Dynasty Warriors series.
Yes.
I need to go look at that PSN game. I'm sorry. This is probably kind of just a reminder for me, for post-production stuff. Like, hey, you're editing this. Go do this now. Oh, okay. Thanks, me.
Yeah. We've already talked about Koei's history, like in the past podcast when we covered the Super NES port of Civilization, which Koei also published like the console. So,
Right.
So if you want more history about the company, like you can go listen to that episode. I will give you a little bit of history though, about the aforementioned Nobunaga, who this series is named for, and about what was going on in Japan in this time period. So, Cliff Note version of Japanese history in this time period, condensed down to about 2 minutes. So, the main character who this series is named for was Oda Nobunaga, who is certainly one of the most famous and ambitious, the daimyos of this time period. A daimyo was a figure who basically was the ruler, the fief, the province, the domain of land that he had pretty much absolute control over in Japan, this time period. This game takes place during the late 16th century, when the Warring States period in Japan had reached its climax. For complex reasons that are far outside the scope of this podcast, central authority in Japan broke down in the mid to late 15th century, and there was no shogun. The shogun was the central figure who basically ruled the country. Then, as now, Japan did have an emperor, but then as in now, the emperor had very little real power. He was mostly a figurehead. So
It's like
shogun,
the Queen in England.
Yeah, well, the emperor actually had a little bit more power in this time period than the Queen did, but
Not a knock against our friends in the UK.
No. But the emperor pretty much was just shut away in Kyoto, the capital, the capital of the country, because Tokyo didn't exist in this time period. And pretty much, if he started getting a bit too antsy and started trying to issue a whole bunch of proclamations or whatnot, the shogun or whoever was in charge of the city could just assign guards to the palace to quote unquote protect him. So. The actual power was very, very limited. It was the shogun who actually controlled the country, and like I just said, that authority broke down during this time period. The game has Japan divided into 50 fiefs. In reality, there were a lot more. They just simply combined a bunch of them and condensed the map a little bit to make it easier.
Yeah, I was gonna say it might be too many resources.
Right. Yeah, like the Sega gameplay. But the game just had the most important and critical of those fiefs.
Besides, I think that would bolt on another 10 hours of gameplay to that.
Yeah, probably. So Oda Nobunaga came to power in 1560, which is when two of the four scenarios in this game starts. And by all counts, he was a very good tactician, a very good warrior, very smart. He was also very ruthless, very aggressive, and very bloodthirsty. He would think nothing about making a peace treaty and then betraying it and sacking a temple and killing a whole bunch of people to make a point and that kind of stuff. Which is why eventually, when he's well on his way to being able to become the most powerful figure in Japan and was well on his way to probably unifying the country, he was suddenly betrayed and trapped in his castle in 1582 by one of his underlings and was forced to commit seppuku. So after that point, one of the other generals took over and finished the unification of the country. But because he was low-born, the other noble clans would not accept him as being the actual shogun. When he finally passed away in the 1590s, a figure by the name of Tokugawa, who actually had served Oda as a boy, started to compete with one other powerful daimyo for control of the country. The two sides met in a huge titanic battle. The Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, which was the biggest battle in Japanese history, and until Waterloo, the biggest battle in world history. Just to give you an idea how huge this fight was. Tokugawa won, and he established a dynasty that would go on to rule Japan for the next 250 years. Until the country was forced open by Westerners in the 1850s. So. So, with that little bit of history behind us, the game has 4 scenarios that you can pick
Thanks
from.
for the history lesson. No, it was actually really interesting. Like, joking aside, that was actually... Like, I didn't know, like, how big all of that was.
Right, and this game... and this game... this has been a very popular topic for other games to cover. Also, I'll mention toward the end of this podcast some other like well-known games that have also dealt with this time period. It's a popular time period, for good reason, because it's very interesting. There's a whole bunch of interesting characters, a whole bunch of things going on. This game, like the ease of simplicity and gameplay, sacrifices or omits a whole bunch of stuff that really made this period very, very unique. You also had a whole bunch of religious things going on too, because Christians were also a factor. Christianity had been introduced to the country at this time period,
right?
And you had Christians doing riots and revolt, that kind of stuff. You also had the Ichi, the warrior monks, who also a major factor. Japan this time period was completely lost all central authority. There were a whole bunch of peasant riots, samurai riots, daimyos who would become successful campaigns become bloodthirsty, betrayed and murdered, by their own sons in some cases. Ninjas were running amok, doing things like poisoning daimyos and sabotaging fields and blowing up holes in castles.
Stuff.
Yeah, right. So I mean,
the ninjas doing ninja stuff.
Well, ninjas were not straight up fighters like Hollywood and media tends to portray them. They were actually sneaky, a little better than thieves actually. Just like
video games have portrayed them.
Right. But most video games, there are some video games that have portrayed ninjas pretty accurately. So, but they were just hired thugs basically. Was all they were. They had no sense of honor, no sense of loyalty. They just simply would go in and be hired for a mission and go do assassination or destroy something or whatnot. So, firearms have been introduced to the country recently by European visitors. During the Tokugawa Dynasty, Japan shut itself off from the outside world, except for one small trading port operated by the Dutch, in Nagasaki. Partly because of the disruptive influences that Westerners they felt at least had in the country during this time period, with things like Christianity and horses and on guns and that kind of stuff. So, it was very, very bloodthirsty, very, very chaotic. Just a whole unsettled period during this time period, which the game tries to recreate as best they can. But again, limitations of the hardware and hardware not wanting to get too complicated, like the sake of gameplay.
Yeah.
But you found this game difficult enough, like it was, George, like what I understand.
Oh, boy. Setting number 1 might as well be setting number 5.
This game does give you a whole bunch of options, like I really appreciate. First of all, this is one of a handful of games that supports this, that supports the Super NES mouse.
Yay!
I never used the mouse for this game, but I can
imagine.
I can imagine it works pretty well. I had no problem with using the keypad to navigate around, but
since I was emulating this, I had to tweak my mouse so it wouldn't be overkill.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
So, so having mouse supports it. So having mouse supports it. Your mouse support for the game is a very nice touch.
Yeah.
And again, it betrays the original PC versions. I like this game. So. There are 4 scenarios that you pick from, like I mentioned earlier. Battle for the East is 1560. This is a simplified version of the game. It only takes place in the Kanto plains, the central region of Japan. And there's only 17 fiefs that you can pick from, having the map. So it's kind of the beginner / tutorial
and
campaign.
It still was kind of hard.
It is at first. We'll get into the game's learning curve later on, I think. But this is. It definitely does take
climbing Mount Everest.
Scenario 2 is Daimyo Power Struggles, 1560. Also, this one's expanded to include all of Japan. Ambition Untamed, 1571. This is when Japan was starting to solidify under the control of Oda and some of the other more successful daimyos. Not as many people to pick from, not as many factions to worry about, that kind of stuff. And finally, Road Toward Unification in 1582. This is the year historically that Oda was betrayed and committed seppuku. And again, Japan's much more simplified and much more unified, like this scenario. You can also pick from difficulty levels, as George alluded to, five different levels. This mostly affects how good the AI is in combat, and also,
oh boy,
and it also affects how often that good events versus bad events hit you. It also affects your chance of your daimyo dying like every year, I think, and some other small stuff like that.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So. Oh, okay. I didn't even know that was a thing. Okay. He could just flat out die. Does he have like an aneurysm or something?
No, I was gonna get into this just a moment.
He had bad curry or something.
Nope, I was gonna get into this in just a moment. You then said how many players that you want to play, and this is nice.
8 players, right?
You can go all the way up to 8 players, yes.
Which is awesome.
Passing the controller back and forth, obviously.
I kind of wish there was a way to, even if you weren't able to play, like, control all the fiefs or whatever, like, at least at the beginning, like, make it so that there's no AI, because I've always liked a game where you can play a strategy game with other people.
Right.
And see where it goes from there.
Right. And you can also set the game to play by itself, without any human players
at
all. Yeah, yep, just set 0.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep, it is a nice touch. Just watch the game you watch the game play if you want to.
You don't want to do that because it's just a bunch of military screens or whatever. Combat screens.
Well, the options you can set. In the option of the game, you can also set if you want to view the battles or not. So if you want to see the battles that the other computer players are playing, select yes. If you only want to see your battles,
which
select
after
no.
my first playthrough, I turned that off because I was sitting there for
a long time.
Good, a long time. Let us go with that, a long time.
You then select which daimyo that you want to rule, and you're told some basic information about him. And also, like in a very tabletop RPG style, you get to roll your stats.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. So,
when I was selecting land, I always selected like a corner piece because that means only one person would go to war with me.
I was going to get into that later on in the game with vice playing the game, but that's a good strategy to follow. Yes. So, playing Oda is definitely recommended. Like you're new to the game because not only does he get like unique music. Because he's cool and powerful like that.
Wait, which one is he? Which thief or whatever is he?
I don't remember the number. He's the one who starts off in Tokyo Plain. Like in the center of the map.
Okay.
That province like right there, like along the coast. He's also like very skilled, so like he's a very good daimyo, like for like a new player to pick, to kind of make things easier. And you want to pick somebody who's young if you can, because every year there's a chance your daimyo can die. If your daimyo has a high health rating, that prolongs his life, but eventually he's gonna croak, and if he dies, that's it, game over. There's no successor. So,
what's young? Like 20?
There are some daimyos who historically died in the 30s.
Right.
And like I said, you can prolong that, but if you have a high health rating and also simply just reloading the game if he passes away, and maybe that year he won't.
What was life expectancy back then?
Our information from this time period indicates that before the wars, it was pretty good in Japan. Obviously, it went down because of the 100 years plus of civil war and turmoil the country that went through. But better than Europe at this time period. I want to say probably 50s was probably like in.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's pretty good considering I think when the U.S. was starting, life expectancy was around there, right? And that was 1800s, 1700s.
one of the famous dominoes in the
Pretty
game.
good.
One of the famous dominoes in the game. I believe it was like Mori, who was one of the more famous powerful ones. His domains were the southern tip of Honshu Island. He didn't pass away. Flight was like as high. He didn't pass away. Flight was like high 70s.
Wow.
And Tokugawa, I believe it's pronounced like I believe his first name is pronounced like Inogiesu, who founded the Tokugawa dynasty. He didn't pass away until 1612, like in his 80s. So
that's really good. Like, even for this time now, that's pretty good.
So there were some, so there were some like were very long lived, but so anyway, so you have to be cognizant of the fact that you only have X number of years to achieve your goal, which obviously is the unification
that's
of
assuming
the country.
Also you're not being assassinated or something by somebody.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So.
Turn 2. You were assassinated. Game over. Oh, thanks, game.
Which can happen sometimes, but just like certain dominoes are more prone to be targeted than others. Again, there's a whole bunch of factors going on behind the scenes here. So, but so when the game actually starts, like each game turns a month. The game randomly decide the order each month that the thieves play in. You get a turn for every thief that's under your control. Later on in the game, when your domain gets very, very big, it's recommended to take the interior fiefs, the ones that are not in any danger of being attacked by anybody, and turn them over to AI control, just to minimize the amount of land you actually have to directly rule under and make the game go a bit faster. You can still request and get supplies and taxes from them, that kind of stuff. So, and you can do one action in each thief, like each turn, pretty much. So, there's a bunch of things you can do. The game is menu driven. I think the biggest. Personally, it's going to be hard for me to say this because, of course, I have years and years of history playing this game, but I think the biggest hurdle for trying to learn this game is trying to remember what all the icons like on the screen mean. Mm-hmm. Because to make the game accessible to Japanese players as well as U.S. players, because the game got released simultaneously in both countries in December 1993. The menu just simply shows you icons. So once you learn the icons as to what means what, it can be kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I looked up in the manual and it was still kind of confusing. But hey, video games. Yeah. You're really not doing that much turn to turn. Which is why I said earlier, this game is actually one of Kawai's simpler strategy. That's why I had games. That's probably the reason why I had a problem with this game. Not really. Huh. Not the problem like, oh, I didn't like it. The problem of I can't do much, so much cannot be done. If that makes sense. Well, later games in the franchise are definitely more complicated. Because there wasn't much managing to do, so unless I was being stupid or I didn't know how to play or something. Is pretty light. Yeah, that's why it was like, how do I get money and why can't I train enough troops and why do people attack me every turn? God dang it! You can do the basic things you can do in the game are pretty direct. You can move soldiers back and forth between your fiefs. You can go to war. You can increase taxes, which gives you more money during the one-time period each year when taxes are collected, but it also decreases the loyalty of your peasants. Yep. Transfer supplies between fiefs. You can raise the level of flood control, which increases the amount of farmland you have, which therefore increases the amount of food you have, and also protects
Like it also protects your feet from being damaged, like should a flood or typhoon event hit your fief. You can make a non-aggression pact or arrange a marriage, like a neighbor. Very important to do so, as George just alluded to. You can cultivate, which improves the overall welfare of the fief. If a merchant's visiting your fief, you'll be told at the start of the turn that the merchant's in town. You can use the merchant to buy or sell rice, to borrow funds, to purchase weapons. Because you want to have a well-armed army as well. You can recruit the military, be the soldiers and ninjas. You can train the army, which increases the fighting efficiency. You can spy on arrival to see what they're doing. Expanded town, which increases your taxes. So it decreases your tax base, but also decreases peasant loyalty. You can give either gold or food to your peasants or soldiers to raise their morale. You can steal peasants like neighboring fiefs to encourage them.
Wait, really?
Yeah. You send over ninjas on missions to encourage them to come over your fief instead because life's better over there. Yada yada yada. So
life's better over here. Tax is 30%.
I actually never had my tax rate higher than 20% in the game, actually. But that was.
I didn't know what I was doing, so I raised it to 25, and then I was like, "Well, I'm probably gonna lose two turns from now, so what does it matter?"
You can also shuffle the. You can also rearrange and reorganize your army. We'll get into battle here in a little bit. You can recuperate. Recuperate, which basically just means rest for a turn, do nothing. Because even your daimyos get sick. Or if you're not really sure what to do, pass a turn. But passing a turn is not recommended because
you might as well just rest
or train the troops. Basically, hint number one for this game: when you're not sure what to do, train the army.
That works too.
But because many times in this game, I'd have a small army, but have them well equipped. With arms and well trained, and numerous times I'd be able to beat a larger army that evaded me because their army was not as trained or armed as mine was.
Right.
So, and that's basically how gameplay operates. That's pretty much half the game right there. The other big half of the game is the battle scene. So when you go to battle, you're shown a kind of abstracted picture map, like the fief that the war is being fought in. One screen, so that kind of makes it simpler. Later games would be multi-screens as far as the map size went, but this one, because it was a port of the NES game, they kept it simplistic in that sense, and just one screen. There's a castle, which is your headquarters, the best place in the game for defense. There's also a town, which is considered to be the main urban center of the province. Defensive town's pretty good, but you don't want to fight there if you can help it, because the fact that any damage that you find down there will damage the town. And you'll see the effects after the battle's done. And depending on the fief, there can be rivers, mountains, forest, hills. Basic logic applies there for how the terrain operates, and the pros and cons of fighting in a terrain or whatnot. So your army can have anywhere from 3 to 5 units in it, which are depending upon how you have your army organized and the number of soldiers in your command, and they fall into 3 different, well, actually really 4 different types. Your command unit is number 1. This is your best soldiers. These are your elite soldiers. These are the guys who are directly fighting with and under the command of the daimyo himself. This is your best unit on the map, bar none. So try to use these. So Flexy one, try to use these guys carefully. You also have your riflemen. Like I said, guns have been introduced to Japan by Europeans at this time period. These are the slow, difficult to reload, hard to fire weapons. So the firepower is a little bit better than infantry as far as that goes. Then you also have cavalry. Horses are very expensive and very hard to maintain because you need spare land to be able to feed them and resources to be able to take care of them. So really only the rich samurai actually had horses. Cavalry is very quick and very powerful. And then if you have enough men, you can also have a 4th and 5th unit, which is just basically like basic infantry. And there's paper rock scissors cycle in this game too, as to how you should be attacking if you can, because riflemen are devastating against cavalry. Cavalry is very devastating against infantry, and infantry is very effective against riflemen. So if you attack in those orders, you'll be better off. So, if you're the invader, your goal is to either destroy the command unit or wipe out the entire army before 30 days elapse. If you're the defender, your goal is to destroy the command unit or to keep your command unit alive for 30 days. Which led to many humorous situations where it's like, I'm down to one unit, he's down to one unit, and he just chases me around the battlefield the rest of the game. Well, the rest of the battle, actually. So it's like, because I can't fight straight out because he's stronger than me and he'll kill me, but because he's down to one unit, I can just run around the side of the map for like 20 days. And then eventually time runs out and I win. So
what a war, Greg. I just imagine all your units are wiped out. It's just you. So what do? You just start running around until they run out of resources.
Yeah. That is like pretty funny, so if you kill the daimyo, like either on the offensive or defensive side, so you take over like his land, which is a nice bonus. And you can also send spies, ninjas, into his fleet beforehand if you want to destroy his supplies or to demoralize the troops to help. Many things that you can do there. We know you had problems figuring out some of the menu simulation aspects. George, what do you think about the battle aspect? I like this game.
Kind of limited. It
is, yeah.
It's like attack or don't attack, kind of. I mean, there's also the placement aspects where, you're on the town square or whatever, or the capital or whatever it is, you have a stronger defense, so on and so forth. But you don't have any abilities to use, it's just attack or don't attack, really.
Yeah. Well, again, part of that is again because of how old this game is. Mm-hmm. And you can have a huge number of soldiers in your army if you want to. Historically, in this time period, the daimyos waged war with armies anywhere from like 20 to 70,000 men. But you can have hundreds of thousands of men in your army if you want to, as long as you can support it. And probably later on in the game, you will have that many men because you're going to need it. So,
I needed it at the beginning. Man.
So, anyway, that's basically how the game operates. Like I said, for co-op games, it's actually very simple as far as the actual simulation part. Once you figure out what all the icons mean and what does what and what's good against what and that kind of stuff. The map is just simply Japan divided up into 50 fiefs if you're playing the full game. Most of the fiefs are on Honshu, which is the main island of the country. You can just barely see Hokkaido, the northern island, on one side of the map. That's a single. That's the one fief because then as of now, Hokkaido is least populated like the main islands. And there's also the two southern islands of Kyushu and Shikoku on the map. There are no bridges, obviously, in this time period, but you can just. But most of the game just assumes that at certain points that water access is possible, so you can just transport your army or troops or supplies or whatever across the channel, which I believe is shown on the map as to which areas are connected like that. So
No idea.
The graphics for this game, because this is an NES port, the graphics of the game are pretty basic compared to Super NES standards. There's good use of colors. I think that all the thieves I think are pretty clearly recognizable from one another because of the color choices. There's some very nice touches with some of the graphics. Like for example, I love the animations. The cute little animations like about soldiers training, the ninjas doing their missions, like your daimyos like signing the lines with somebody else. All those events have short little cute graphical animations on the screen, which I always loved because the NES version I had those also. The map has a very Japanese look to it. It almost looks like the map's made out of like rice paper. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. I didn't see that until you just brought it up, and that's a nice touch.
The music of the game is again a direct remix, like the original music, like the NES version, which is why there's not very much of it. It's about maybe like there's a whole, I think 5 songs in the game. That's it. So
yeah, it's kind of limited.
But so it's limited, which I kind of regret. But I do think they did a very good job taking advantage of the Super NES sound chip and remixing the songs. The songs sound very good in this version. I think they're very deep. They use a lot of instruments. They definitely sound rich. The music definitely has a very Japanese feel. It's very rich, rich and full sounding. So good use of the hardware at least.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the opening screen / main menu theme stuck in my head for days.
Really?
Yeah, like it's a good piece. Again, nostalgia reasons because I have a lot more experience playing the NES version of this game than the Super NES version. Like I did play the Super NES version quite a bit too, but because I said the music's the same in both versions, so it's like I just heard the music again and again and again for so much over the years.
Right.
Just kind of stuck with me.
That's kind of like some Dynasty Warriors 3 music stuck in my head.
Yeah, right. So that's the game in a nutshell. The game does have a battery pack to save your progress. As you go through the game, you can save. I couldn't
imagine somebody back then sitting down and playing through a whole game. I can't imagine how long it takes to finish just the first one.
Oh, the beginning one?
Yeah.
You can go through that in about 2 to 3 hours if you're good.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad.
The NES version of the game also had a battery pack, which in 1989 was still pretty...
That's pretty good.
Was still pretty, uncommon thing. Because I think Zelda was the first game to really have a battery pack, and then, a couple games followed after that. But this is definitely one of the early ones, so yeah.
Hold reset and push power.
Yep.
So you don't lose your save.
Yep. So
I've had that happen to me.
I only had it happen once, and that was my own fault. So, but
it sucks when you have a Final Fantasy cart that's
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, definitely, I agree with you. I mean, playing this game without a battery pack would basically just be unplayable. But because a regular game could take you from 10 to 20 hours. Game time to go through it. So we mentioned the fact that this franchise is quite long and popular. There have been over the years, doing a quick count right here. Let's see, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14 games released in the franchise.
Wow.
This was the second game of the series. The original Nobunaga Exhibition game came out in 1983 in Japan only for Japanese PCs. It was a basic game, entirely basic, very little graphics. Just like
at that point, yeah.
Yeah. They remade the game, curiously enough, in 1995 for Windows 3.1, Sega Saturn, and PlayStation. So, which kind of just shows how, again, most of these, the series was very popular in Japan, and
was that released in the West?
No.
Okay.
Most of these games were not released in the West. I'll point out the ones that were. But there have been numerous systems and computers which have had this computer which had a Nobunaga Exhibition game on it. It's probably a lot quicker to go through a list of systems that have not had a Nobunaga Exhibition game on it because there are very, very few. This is a port of the second game. It originally came out in Japan in September 1986 for the PC-88 SR, which I have no idea what that is.
It's a PC.
Obviously, I just never heard of it. It got ported in Japan to the Famicom, Super Famicom, Mega Drive, PC Engine, CD-ROM, PlayStation, mobile phones, Windows, and iOS. Over the years. The NES version of the game, which came out in the West, we already mentioned 1989. The Super NES and Genesis ports of the game followed in 1993, and this game is also available on the Virtual Console in North America, which I didn't know about.
That's pretty cool.
But Nobunaga's Ambition 2 is a game I also spent a lot of time playing because that game also got released in the West.
Is that game better?
In some ways, I think it is. In some ways, not.
Okay.
That game got ported. That game originally got released in 1988 Japan. It came out with the NES in 1990. The main differences of that game is that battle's more complicated. You actually have like 2 battle screens in that game. You have both a thief screen and you also have a castle screen. So you can withdraw to the castle to make your final stand, for example, in that game.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And the game has a separate map screen for that. There's more dominoes to play from. The maps a bit bigger. Not really too many more options added. Too many more options added. They added to the game. One of the main additions to the game is that was added the idea of the Hatamotos, the lieutenants, which you think of as generals. So you can recruit a whole bunch of samurai to serve under you in your fief as either like you take care of the town, or you take care of the army, or you command this unit or whatnot.
You pet my horses.
Pretty much, yeah. So, and you can bribe and recruit them from their daimyos, or they could be done the same to you, or that kind of stuff. So, yeah. So the addition of the generals and having the map screen, the battle screen divided up into 2 areas is the main changes that the game had. A little bit better graphics, and more music to it. Like the game, it's pretty good. I still prefer the original game better, but the second game's not bad.
Okay.
As I said before, this game definitely shows the fact there's a port of the earlier NES version. They would release later on for 16-bit systems a proper Nobunaga game that actually utilized the power of those systems. That game is called Lord of Darkness, Nobunaga's Ambition, like Lords of Darkness, which came out for the Super NES Genesis in 1995. That's a very good game because that game has different scenarios, has different options. The options available to it, it's much more richer and deeper gameplay like that game. And again, like I said, because that game was designed. What started out as life in Japan, again 8-bit systems, but they did a much better job of making the game actually utilize the power of the Genesis Super NES compared to Nobunaga's Ambition. So I think it's a better game overall because of that reason. So, There was also a Game Boy game, which was a weird hybrid mix of like the first two Nobunaga Mission games, plus also some other new stuff added to it. And then that's pretty much the last game released in the West for a long time.
Wow.
It was the next game in the franchise to get released in the U.S. was Nobunaga's Ambition: Rise to Power, the PS2 in 2008.
We might have to cover that.
I've never played it. The main thing the game introduced was castle towns and unified castle sieges.
Well, you know what? When it gets around to my choice for PlayStation Power, I think we might do that.
And the game was also like in full 3D.
I hope so. It's a PS2 game.
And then of course the last game, so like the next two games. The next game in the franchise also got a U.S. release, Nobunaga's Ambition, like Iron Triangle, in 2010.
I prefer Steel Triangle. I'm sorry, go on.
The following game, though, Road to the Heavens, did not get a U.S. release. The most recent game in the franchise, though, as George and I have already alluded to, did get a U.S. release. Nobunaga's Ambition, Sphere of Influence, which is also available for the besides being on Steam, like the PS3, PS4, and the PS Vita.
Wait, it's not on any American consoles? That's interesting.
According to this, it got released. Yeah, it looks like it only got a PC release, like here in North America.
Interesting.
But, well, we understand why, because of course this is a niche game. The franchise has always done, like I said, the franchise was much more popular in Japan than it is here. It does have its fans over here, but I think Koei just simply realized that the best way to be able to tap that fan base was just simply limit it to the PC version, and just be done with it, because...
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but, curiously enough, though, they are releasing a version of the game like the Switch, in Japan, which should already be out. So, but
maybe I'll see if there's an English version of that.
There was also, just to finish up real quick. There was also a version of the game for the Wonder Swan, the Game Boy Color,
Wonder Swan.
Yeah, Wonder Swan, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS. Got a few games for it. There's also like several online games, and there's also like an MMORPG based upon the franchise, which came out in Japan. So, and there have been other games, like I said before, which have been set in this Warring State period, because it is such a rich history, and fascinating topic to cover. Koei themselves did also the Kessen series for the PS2.
Oh, yes.
The PS2 and PS3, which was also set in this time period. And there's also a very popular microprose computer game from the late 80s called Swords of Samurai, which is set in this time period, which is really a great game. That's also available on Steam like right now too. One of the Total War games was also set during this time period, like Total War Shogun, which is pretty good.
What a time for video games.
Yeah, so... when this game came out in North America, it got pretty good reviews. The Super NES version of the game, however, got definitely lukewarm ratings compared to the original NES version of the game, because, GamePro, for example, praised the control interface and combat system, but said basically the game really didn't have anything to basically said the game really didn't have anything to recommend it like over the original, show the original PC like in NES games. So segueing here in closing thoughts, that's the main drawback to this game, because it's like, I did not buy this game full price because I found out, thanks to a friend, that pretty much all this game is just simply a slightly enhanced version of the NES game with like a little bit better graphics, music, and that's it. So it's like I did eventually get the game, at a bargain price, but it's like I wouldn't have paid full price for it. If I had paid full price for it, I would have been very soundly disappointed because, and George, I think we came on this topic like quite a bit. If you're gonna remake a game, remake the game beyond just the graphics, music.
Man, we could go on for another 2 hours about me talking about remade games.
Right? Yeah, because I don't mind. I don't mind a remake of the game if it's done well, but just giving more beyond graphics, graphics and sound effects, because it's like, Koei did this with a bunch of their other games too. This wasn't the only game of theirs they did this to. There were four other games that they also ported over, like in the NES, Super NES. They did the same thing with Gemfire, which is a fantasy-based strategy game. They did the same thing with Genghis Khan, which I think it's pretty obvious what you're doing in that game. And with the first two Romance 3 games, and this game, all 5 games, they just simply shoved them over to Super NES and Genesis and just gave it a very slight upgrade, and that's it. So, it's like I understand why you did it. Because if you didn't have the original NES version, then this is a perfectly good version to pick up and play. But it's like, I already have this game. Why would I want to show out 40, 50, 60 bucks or whatever it was to pick this game up? When Phil was on the podcast, Phil the No Swear Gamer, last year talking about Tecmo Bowl, I made the same argument back then because it's like Tecmo Bowl for Super NES is just pretty much toward the NES game, and like he was great toward it because he didn't have an NES as a kid. But I'm like, I already played that. I've already played hundreds of hours on this game in the NES. Why would I want to pay $60 for like a slightly souped up Super NES port? And it's like nowadays, it's like just use an example. Square just taking their Final Fantasy games, just simply like giving them like an HD remake. It's like, I understand the HD remake looks gorgeous, but is it really necessary to do that considering this game only came out like 4 years ago? It's just like, if you're gonna remake a game, give me more than just like graphics. It's like, like Wings, for example, that we covered in the past podcasts. The version of the game that's available on Steam now is a major upgrade to the game. Not only upgrade graphics and sound effects, they also added in voices and new missions and like and added support for like joysticks and that kind of stuff. That's an upgrade. That's a remix. If you're going to remake a game, go that route. Don't just give me like just warm it up. Warm it up like super souped up graphics and just like one charge the full price for it. If you're gonna do that crap, make it a bargain title released. Like you put it out there for like $20.
So, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we've come to that point where there are remakes and there are remasters, and remasters are basically not much has been added, but the graphics have been upped and they've been ported to newer platforms and stuff like that, whereas the remake now it is more accurate, whereas even just like a few years ago where it's like, oh, it's a remake, and it's like, no, it's basically considered a remaster. Like now a remake is an actual remake, whereas they bolted on this title of remaster to games that are basically just upped in graphics for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
And you see that now, especially with Final Fantasy X, like it'll say Final Fantasy X 10 to remaster, not remake.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
so at least so now you can put the pressure where it needs to be. If somebody says it's a remake, oh no, it's actually a remaster. You title it as a remake, it's not really remade, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and also now you can know like, oh, this is just the same exact game as this. Then I'm not gonna buy it because I already played this on that platform.
Plus the remake, Plus also the remake market's booming these days. I mean, like there have been a lot of games.
Final Fantasy 12 remaster.
Yep.
I think is.
They just came out with a remake of Full Throttle, which is a classic point-and-click game by Lucasfilm.
Right.
They just came out with Planescape Torment remake last month.
Did they, or was it like a sequel?
Well, the sequel came out at the same time the remake.
Spiritual successor or whatever.
Both games came out at the same time. They remade the original game, Torment, and they also released a sequel.
Right. Okay.
But
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yes, I remember seeing that now. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So, and then like and then like last year, Double Fine came out with a very good remake of like Day of the Tentacle, which is like very good. So it's like
Yes, I have that. I need to play that again.
yeah, it's a fun game. It's a very good remake. So it's like but so if you're doing sizable things like that, that's fine. That's fine. Like I'm all for that. But more and more, I see things like this game we're talking about here in this podcast just being like a lazy conversion that's a money grab. Because it's like, because it's like.
Is it really lazy though? I mean, if you're taking a port and you're you're taking a game and you're porting it to a newer console and you're making sure that
but there was no need to port the game because there really wasn't anything. Yeah, but
are you sure about that? Because we are at that point where. Oh, someone was an Xbox guy, or somebody did, or people didn't have a PS2 because they couldn't afford it.
Back in the early '90s. Well, when the game came out.
I mean, that's different. If we're talking about modern, so many factors.
Right. So it's like so just my closing thoughts on the game is like I like this game a lot. Well, obviously I'm covered a bit because of my strong history and nostalgia like of the game. The Super NES port of the game is perfectly good. It's a perfectly fine version of the game, but there's really nothing recommended like over the NES version. Except for this, except the slightly better graphics. Graphics and music. So it's like if you've never played the game, or played anything in the series, this is probably like a good game to start out with. But Lords of Darkness is a much better game, I think. Just a much deeper and richer game. Nobunaga's Ambition 2 for the NES also has a lot more ambition to it also. It's like, I don't understand why this game was made, basically.
Nobunaga's Ambition on the NES has more ambition. Wonderful.
Pretty much, yeah. So.
Wonderful.
It's because that game was more like groundbreaking. This is just like, been there, done that.
Slash rant.
But yeah, so like I said, that's probably that. So we probably have said enough like about that. That's a topic. That's a topic that probably could fill up like a whole different podcast.
I'm sure we could fill like 3 podcasts about that stuff if we really want to boil down to it.
Yes. So George, your impressions. I mean, you already said some of it. Like how you kind of found the fact this game is kind of old and simple, with kind of a limitation, which is curious to hear you say that, because I think that if anything, this is actually like one of Kawai's easier games to pick up and play. I think compared to some of the other games.
This game is brutal. I found myself having trouble at the beginning of the game because. Oh, I was attacked. Okay, I can defend myself. Oh, I'm getting attacked the next round. Okay, I can still kind of defend myself. Okay, he's attacking me again the 3rd round. Like, dude, do you not have anything else better to do? And then I get wiped out easily because I'm trying to train troops, or I'm trying to get new troops, and I can't because I'm running out of money or something, and I keep getting attacked, and it's like... It's very difficult to survive, even with the one guy tagging. I tried playing one of the thieves in the middle, and that was even worse because there was 3 guys attacking me, and it's like I can't even survive like up to the 3rd round here.
Right? Yeah.
I read the manual and it helped, but it's just like still, I didn't know what to do because it's just like whatever I tried, I still. Eventually just lost early on in the game. I couldn't get too far. There was a point where I actually was able to stave off some people, and then I tried attacking, and that didn't go over well, and that led to just me completely losing. So this... am I dumb? I don't know, but this game was brutal for me. It's a cool game for sure, and it is kind of simplistic. I don't see how you find it one of the easier ones though, because if this is one of the easier ones, then geez, I'm in for a rude awakening.
I think you are, because there are a bunch I have a lot of history and love for this company, and I think there's a lot of their games of a lot of historical simulation games like the Ilk that I really love, but I think all those games are more complicated.
I think the game being limited kind of hurts it.
Yeah, I mean PTO has you controlling the the American and Japanese side of the entire Pacific Theater, which is a whole bunch of things to do. Liberty or Death is an American Revolution game, which is very complicated because you have to deal with politics and supplies and generals and troops and that kind of stuff. So there's Genghis Khan is a world conquest game, where it's you've got politics and supplies, that kind of stuff. The scope of this game being limited to Japan makes the game simpler and easier to pick up than some of the other more bigger or world-expanding games that Kawhi released over the years.
I feel like maybe the biggest thing is it doesn't give you any breathing room at the beginning to get your bearings and get what you need to get done. I don't think there's enough room for that, and that's why I'm failing, because I don't have enough time to help. Because if we're playing Civ 5 or whatever, you're not at war. You're not automatically at war round one. You're there, you're building up, you have the chance to get more settlements and build up your army a bit and get experience and whatnot. And then eventually you do go into war and you're ready for that. But even if you fail, it's not going to be a major loss the first few times. So this game is 0 to 100 instantly. It's 0 to 500 right away.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a fair complaint. There is some advice that I can give to anybody out there wanting to pick this game up. As George recommended, taking a thief where you can only be attacked on one side or the most two sides is probably very helpful to start the game out. To start the game out with. You want to try to unify and you want to try to grab control of your area to minimize the attacks to you, just one or two provinces quickly if you can. Taking over all Kyushu or Shikoku Island, for example, is very beneficial because you have a good, except at that point you're alone on the island and you're going to be attacked in one or two places. Signing a non-aggression pact or an alliance with your neighbors is very important also. Do anything you can to try to get that guy over on your side to give you that breathing space that George was talking about. To allow you to be able to get your foundation up.
Diplomacy, who needs that?
Yeah, diplomacy is very important.
Stab them with your spear.
Definitely take advantage of ninjas before you do an attack. Send them over to the damage things and sap morale of their troops and whatnot. You can also if you have a lot of money, send over ninjas to assassinate the daimyo. If he doesn't have a successor, the thief will go up for sale and put the highest bid in, and it's yours. So you can have a bloodthirsty conquest. Like that thief.
I don't think drinking blood is good for you. I heard a report about that somewhere.
Focus first up on trying to get your army well trained and well armed, because like I said, a small army that's good in both those areas can defeat a much larger army that's not. Having a good field agricultural and town base for taxes and food also and food is also critical. If you hit and the running around a battle screen, if you're to stave off defeat is also a very viable tactic. As silly as it looks.
Yeah.
And just basically, if you have really bad luck in one year for one reason or another, reload, try again. There's no because of the random factors that get the factors of the game. No 2 years play the same. So if you have bad luck. Of course. So you have really bad luck one year, load it up again, and you should have better luck the second try. I'd encourage you, George, to check out Lords of Darkness also, because I think that game is a much more richer and fuller game that probably will give you more of the stuff you're looking for.
I might go check out the new game, or the newer game.
Yeah. I think, definitely. I think that the reviews for Spirit of Influence have been very good. It's definitely a much more complicated game. Anyway, because of the fact that this game is kind of a niche game, there's not many copies all these games that covered up on our podcast can be found on eBay easily enough. But the number of copies that have sold recently and are currently for sale are not that many.
Did you try misspelling the name? Because I feel like there might be a decent amount of listings with the wrong spelling of the name or something.
That could be true. I didn't do that. So
I think there's a service out there that like helps you search for stuff that's been misspelled.
Yeah.
So like people will like misspell Genesis or something, and it'll be like almost like a steal because they just want to get rid of it.
Right.
But they like misspelt it or something. I've seen a few things like that where it's like, oh dude, this is cheaper, and I accidentally misspelled it on my search.
Right.
So
yeah. I meant to mention this earlier before we finish up. This is definitely funny. This definitely fits in that only in Japan category. Some of the spin-offs that have been released in Japan for the Nobunaga's like the Nobunaga's Ambition series, include a Pokemon crossover game, which came out.
What?
Oh, it gets better.
How's it get any better than that?
Which came on 3DS. There is a social network game themed around Nobunaga's Ambition in Japan, and there is a cat-themed browser-based online battle raising simulation game.
Okay, yeah, no, you could definitely, you could definitely get better than the Pokemon game. Dang. Wow.
So yeah, they love this series in Japan.
Are you sure?
I'm dead serious.
Okay.
It's called that last one, the English translation, Samurai Cats.
I need to go look that up now.
2011.
All right.
Cat-themed browser-based online battle/raising simulation game. Okay then.
I think that is the end of this podcast now.
Yeah, almost. I just have the eBay pricing to go over. Like I was saying before, if you want the game, because of that fact, this game's pretty cheap. 32 copies currently. 32 copies of the game currently on sale currently on sale on eBay. 14 copies that recently sold. Card pricing, which includes shipping, will get you anywhere from $8 to $19. There were 2 CIBA copies that sold recently. One for $21 and one for $25.50. So not a very expensive game.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
And being a simulation game, there are no cheat codes or anything else like that, of course, because most of those games don't have stuff of that irk. So, very final thought. Still a fun game. Always fun to go back to and play this game. I spend more time with Lord of Darkness now these days. I want to go back to a 16-bit Nobunaga Ambition title, but still pretty fun. And just basically, if you've never played a game in the series, this is probably a good one. A good one to check out to start out with, because it is kind of simple and easy, at least in some ways. Easy to pick up, at least. Maybe not per se to play, but yeah, it really doesn't have anything to offer over the NES version. So if you played on the NES, you're not really missing anything out by not checking out this version.
Yup.
That's it? Yup.
Yup.
Okay, George has already said his closing thoughts. So.
Yerp.
Okay. What are we covering? Covering the next podcast, George?
Oh, the wonderful game known as Pit Fighter.
Pit Fighter, yes, which just have its defenders. Before I mentioned Phil, I really enjoys this game.
Really?
At least I think he does. But this is a Atari arcade game which is famous for having digitized pictures of the fighters about 2 years before Mortal Kombat did. So that's his main claim to fame.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, Pit Fighter predates Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
So, but the home versions of the game though did not look as well, which we'll get into in the podcast.
Of course not. It does not have the arcade power.
Yes. So, but we will get into that. We very much appreciate you listening to the podcast as always. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, etc., you can either check us out on our Facebook page, or you can also send me an email directly to the SNES podcast at yahoo.com. That is THESNES podcast at Yahoo. We are a proud member of both the Throwback Network and Retro Junkies, where you can find a whole bunch of similarly retro-themed podcasts, both video game and non-video game related. Movie podcast, for example, are like a very big like those networks. So if you want to hear some talk about 80s, like beloved and maybe not so beloved 80s, 90s movies. We're also available on iTunes. If you want to give us a review on there, it's very much appreciated. Our main site's on Libsyn, where you can also stream these podcasts at your pleasure. And George and I also do together the PlayStation Power podcast, which is not family friendly, but we cover like PS1 and PS2 games. The next game planned for that podcast is going to be Final Fantasy VIII. So a very interesting and controversial game. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. George, what other fine outstanding podcast do you put out there for the masses?
Oh boy. If anyone is interested or loves the Master System, well, there's a podcast out there for you. Well, I mean, I didn't do it for you, but it's out there and you can listen to it. Master System Masterpieces. It's fun and it's cool. You should listen to it. Anyway, PlayStation Power, as Greg said, the box fort, which is not family friendly at all.
No.
Buddy and I sit down and just talk, basically. Hey Greg, have you ever heard of the SNES podcast?
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I do that as well. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Chief, that's at MISTURCHEEF, and I think that's about it.
Yes, and George also does live streams like every now and then.
Yeah.
For example, if you're a wrestling fan, he tries to cover a wrestling game like once a week.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yep.
Kind of.
So.
I work has really screwed up my schedule for that.
Yeah.
So once I get work all settled, then I will get that settled.
Work has a nasty habit about getting in the way of your gaming life. So.
Yeah, but I mean, on top of there's actually stuff that I'm bringing home I have to do. So.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, it does, but also when that's done, money.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Sorry, I'll stop.
There was a wrestler. Speaking about, there was a wrestler that used that as that's a theme song, right?
$1 Million Man. Yep.
$1 Million Man. Yes, thank you.
Money.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
that's exactly. I was singing that song while playing Watch Dogs 2. It's out of nowhere, just what am I doing? So
that's funny.
Yeah, I think we're done.
And on that
here.
note, we should probably end the podcast.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you again very much, everybody, for tuning in. We very much appreciate it. Don't be afraid to check out a Koei game, just because of the fact that the games may look daunting at first, but they're not that bad once you get into it.
Yep.
And that's my final thought. Later.
See ya. Good morning, good night, good afternoon.
What he said.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man. Now you're playing with power. Deep of power.